organization, and leadership. So those are clause 4 and 5. And in this week, we are dubbing this as the foundation. And we will get to understand why we are calling it the foundation. So we have set some 4 objectives by the end of tonight. We want us to be able to understand the clause 4 and 5 from these 3 standards. That is ISO 9001, 45001, and 14001. We want to understand what is required of us and why. And then number 2, we'll also want to dig deeper into clause 4 using the prime distributors as a case study to understand the context, the interested parties, the scope, and the process interaction, which now then covers what the requirements of clause 4 are. Clause 5 then will be our next objective, to be able to understand leadership and commitment, as well as the policy and the roles and responsibilities, so that we are able to make IMS come to life within an organization. And then the last one, we'll be able to look at objective evidence as well as common nonconformities from the auditor's side, and also try and look at some pitfalls and how to avoid them. So let me introduce prime distributors, which will be our case study for this entire week. It's basically a made-up company, but it is privately owned, and it is an East African distributor company established in 2015. And it mainly deals with imports and warehousing, and it also repackages the imports that come. And it mainly deals with lubricants, detergents, paints, plumbing, electrical accessories. So they mainly import these things and are able to repackage and then sell all over East Africa. So at the current moment, they have about 70 staff, and we'll be able to look at their growth and how that is can be translated into an internal issues. And the 70 staff are distributed across all the different departments or sections, that is procurement, sales, all the way to QHSE. Then we also have our customer range, all the way from hospitals to hotels to SMEs, NGOs, and even the government across East Africa. And now the board of prime distributors has been able to approve for the IMS. So tonight and even throughout this week, we'll be able to put ourselves in the shoes of ISO consultants, trying to understand and to support prime distributors. So today we will be digging deeper into clause 4 and 5. And throughout the week, as we have been taken through by Paul, we'll go all the way to clause 10. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to contribute to the discussion so that it's not just a one-way conversation. So just to start us off, we have the context, and we want to debunk what is this word context. So context, by the end of today, I want you to remember these 3 main terms. Yeah. And that is what you need to carry with you as you understand the word context of the organization. So the first one is internal and external issues. And then the second term we will look at is the interested parties, and then the scope of the IMS. So with those 3, we will be able to understand what the context of the organization means. So when we look at the internal and external issues, we are looking at what is this that is happening inside the organization. In this case, prime distributors. What else is happening outside of the organization? Probably something that the organization can control or has influence over. And then how does it affect? Remember, each organization, even for the ones that we work in, whether it be the government or your own private business, as you were setting it up, there was a purpose, there was a strategic goal that you are aiming at. There are objectives that you are setting to be able to do. So in the same case with prime distributors, they definitely want to, gain more market share in terms of the products that they are repackaging and selling. they want to be able to grow even beyond East Africa. So what are these things that are happening inside the company or even outside the company that can affect them not to be able to achieve that goal or to be able to achieve the same goal? So these are what we are calling the internal and external issues. So it's things that can affect our culture, our resources, the regulation issues, the market dynamics, and any technological shifts. And we'll be able to understand how do we come up with these internal and external issues. Then there is the second part, which is the interested parties. We want to understand, apart from understanding what is happening inside and outside of our organization, we want to also understand who has stake within our organization, who can affect or who can be affected by what we do. So that is the next question you ask yourself when you're looking at context of the organization. So here we look at, when we're looking internally, we are looking at people like the top management or the management, if you call it so. We are looking at the workers because they have stake within how the company runs, how the management systems will be successful. From the outside, we have the regulators, we have the customers, we have the external community. We definitely, as an organization, don't exist in a vacuum. There's definitely where we are operating within. So the community around us, whether it be the global community or even the local community, these are people who are affected and also affect the way we run our business. So these are who we are collectively calling interested parties. And in the definition of the ISO standards, with the new standards, they are recognizing the term stakeholders. So I think in common terminology of day-to-day conversations, we usually call them stakeholders. So the moment you see the word interested parties, just look at it as the stakeholders who has a stake in what the organization is doing. Then number 3, we are looking at the scope. When we're looking at the scope, we're looking at what are our boundaries and what is the applicability of our management system. In terms of boundaries, we're looking at the geographical or the locational, or in terms of sites. In our case study today, we will assume the fact that it is a multi-site. So how wide is our boundary? Where do we draw the line when it comes to the operations that we do? What is in our control and what is it that we can influence? And what can we manage? And then we also have the products and the services. As we look at prime distributors, we'll definitely confine ourselves to the products and services that they offer. Then in the same case, in whichever organization that you also work in, when you're describing your scope of your integrated management system or whichever management system you're implementing, you need to understand which are the products and services that are within your boundaries, within your control and within your influence. And then we also look at the processes. So which processes are actually covered, which ones are within the scope and which ones are outside our boundary. And then we also look at now the applicability of the management system. So in a nutshell, what we are trying to do in Clause 4, we are trying to ask these 3 questions. What is going on around us? And around us also means within our organization. And then who cares about what we do? And then how far does our IMS? So these are the 3 questions I want us to keep asking ourselves, even as we go throughout discussing the word context of our organization. So when we start off with Clause 4.1, which discusses about the internal and external issues, we are looking at what I alluded to before. There are some things that are happening within the organization and without, or rather outside the organization, that influence or affect the way we do our work. And we should always remember that our compass is our purpose and our strategic direction. So in whatever we are doing, a purpose that we have as an organization is a strategic direction that we have as an organization. Whether it be prime distributors, as we are going to discuss, or whichever organization you're working in. So what are these issues that can be able to affect us reaching that purpose or reaching that strategic direction? So in this case, we will look at it holistically and in an integrated manner, looking at it from the QMS, EMS and OHS perspective. QMS here is about quality, and I want us to expand our mindset, not just to look at quality in terms of the quality of the product, but also quality of our services. Yeah. So even as we look at prime distributors, I know at the first glance, and when you're talking about QMS, you would want to look at the quality control and quality assurance of the products that they're handling, the lubricants or the detergents or the electrical appliances. But I want us to expand our mind to look at even the quality of service. What is the quality of service between the different processes and even towards the external customers? So we will also want to look at who are these internal customers and what do they need, and what are the external customers and what do they need? And then are we doing it in a quality manner? And then when we're looking at EMS, we're looking at the environmental aspect. What is our interaction with the environment? Whether it is the built or the natural environment, how are we interacting with it? And then when it comes to occupational safety and health management systems, we are looking at the worker. How is the worker protected? How is the work, built towards or around the way he's supposed to work? And that is what forms now the integrated management system. So we are looking at them together rather than as separate systems. So when we're looking at the external issues, some of the issues that can crop up can come from different angles, such as the legal or regulatory or the market dynamics. It could also come from technology, and this one is a very real example in this day and age with the issues of AI and all that. Technology is moving quite fast. So how is prime distributors or even the organization that you work in, how are you being able to understand the technological space that you are in? And how is it affecting the way you meet your purpose, your strategic direction, and your objectives? And then we also look at things like competition. We being a business, we definitely want to know who is our competition, what are they doing extra, where are we failing, so that we are able to compete in a better way and be able to get larger market share. Then there's also the social aspect, the community around us, even the workers who work for us, they definitely have to come from the community around us. So how are we affecting the social aspect? What are people thinking about or perceiving our organization as when we're looking at the social aspect? Then economical can go up to the macro level, where we're looking at things like the market in terms of trading and all that. The environmental factors are also coming into play, and we will also be able to discuss this at a later part of the discussion, how these issues of climate change and the environment are really now being incorporated in each and every management system, not just in the EMS scope. When we look at the internal issues, we're looking at things to do with our resources, our knowledge in terms of organizational knowledge. We have instances where for instance, if we take a case of prime distributors, if they were established in 2015, there is definitely one or two people who have walked the journey with the CEO from the inception up to now, with all those years of knowledge of the company knowledge. Even in the organization that you work with, I know you've maybe experienced, or you could be the person holding that organizational knowledge. Maybe you've worked there for 20 years, for 15 years, and you have seen the growth of the organization, how things are changing. And the question I want to pose to each one of us is, how are you maintaining that organizational knowledge? Is it documented somewhere? Or when that person leaves or passes on, God forbid, will that knowledge then go with that person? So these are some of the internal things that can affect how an organization runs or how it meets its purpose and strategic direction. There's also definitely the issue of performance. If a company then is not performing, then soon enough it will come to a standstill. Then there's also the organizational structure and things like governance, which are new aspects that are coming into play with the issues of ESG. So how then are we packaging ourselves as organizations to be able to understand our governance issues, our culture, and all that, and how is it coming into play? How is it affecting the way we run our business? So even as we move through the context of the organization and looking at the internal and external issues, I want us to remember that we don't just do it at the very beginning when we want to get the certification. It's an ongoing process that we have to keep revisiting and reviewing and discussing, even with the people or the stakeholders and the interested parties that are affected by these issues. Then now we can take the case study of prime distributors. So as I had explained, prime distributors is a company that imports things like the electrical appliances, plumbing appliances, and also things like lubricants and degreasers and detergents, and then repackages them and then sells to various customers. So some of the external issues that we can foresee, for instance, this has been an issue even here in Kenya. If we were to suppose that prime distributors is headquartered here in Kenya, the rise in fuel and energy costs. So how is this rise in fuel and energy costs affecting prime distributors? How can we be able to link that to the management system? And then there is also the issues of NEMA regulations. Here in Kenya, we have NEMA, which is a regulator for environmental issues. We have seen with the upcoming of the EPR, and noting that prime distributors, repackages now whatever it has imported in bulk into smaller containers. Now that they have taken that route, it means that once we have the packaging labeled prime distributors, then they have to take ownership of where that waste ends up. So that is what we are calling the EPR regulations. And we have seen this being tightened. Issues of also the effluent management system, it's something that would be applicable to prime distributors. So how is prime distributors understanding what NEMA requires and being able to be dynamic to be able to meet these upcoming regulations or laws? There's also the issues of customers now demanding certified suppliers. Remember, in this day and age, people are more aware, and we're having not just the customer who buys, let's say the B2B, even the end consumer. They are very much aware, and they want to understand this company I'm buying from. Are they responsible over the environment? Are they responsible over their workers? So we are seeing a great push from the far end, the far end of the distribution line. So you're seeing the customers and the consumers pushing for accountability. So with all this coming into play, is prime distributors able to understand what is happening around them in the world that they're operating in and be able to translate that to be able to gear themselves up to meet these demands? Another example of an external issue would be, the supplier performance being inconsistent. So let's say they're getting the imports from China and other imports are coming from Germany or from Australia. So when these suppliers are bringing in the material and you find that there could be some inconsistencies, how then are they able to check to ensure that their end product, whatever they're repackaging to the end consumer, is at par to what they're promising that end consumer? So with the issues coming from the supplier end of the supply chain, it can affect how prime distributors then performs in terms of quality, in terms of environmental sustainability, and even in terms of occupational safety and health, whether they're getting in the products or they're getting in probably the machines. So this inconsistency, how are they able to monitor that supplier performance and be able to translate it to be able to come up with a context tool that can be able to monitor these external issues? Then we also have issues like the non-conforming materials. So if there's inconsistency from the suppliers, then definitely it will affect the product that they're receiving. So this would result in the non-conformity of the incoming material. And this again will then translate to the end consumer. So these are issues that are outside the control of prime distributors, but they do have influence. So, and I love the way ISO 14001 puts it. It really distinguishes what we can control and what we can influence. And because we're using an integrated management system, I want us to pick the best out of each and every management system. So we will find that as we go through this week, we will find that not all the standards have each and every sub-clause or each and every specific wording, like what I'm mentioning, control and influence. So we need to pick the best or the additional information from the various standards so that we are able to completely conform to all the three standards and to try and apply them to even the standards that do not have that specific wording. So even as we're looking at the suppliers and the incoming material being non-conforming, these are things that probably prime distributors does not have 100% control over because they're coming in from the outside. But they have influence. This is where now in later times, as we are going through the clauses, we'll be able to see how we can regulate or control the suppliers so that we are able to, tighten the noose so that we are having more consistency in terms of performance from the suppliers and the conformity of the incoming raw materials. But at this stage, when we are at the context stage, we are just trying to identify what could be the external issues that can come and affect us meeting our objectives or meeting our strategic goal. I forgot to mention that when we're looking at ISO systems, we are guided by the PDCA cycle. The PDCA cycle or the Deming cycle is whereby we talk of P being plan, and that is where clause 4 and 5 fall under. Yeah. So at this stage, we are only planning. We are trying to look at the issues that can impede us or can support us to reach our goal. Yeah. So we are trying to plan around the issues, trying to plan around what needs and expectations can be brought about by the various stakeholders or what we are calling the interested parties. So at this stage, we are doing the planning. And in later clauses, we'll be able to see how then it comes into play in operations when we come to the D in terms of the PDCA cycle. So we have the plan, we have the do, we have and we have the plan, we have the do, we have the check, and we have the act. So as we go through the clauses, we'll be able to go through this entire cycle. But at this stage in clause 4 and 5, we are basically looking at the planning stage. So when it comes to the internal issues at prime distributors, some of the things can be the fact that they are growing at a very rapid pace in terms of the staff and also the products that they are trying to market and grow. So they need more staff. So this rapid growth will definitely affect the way the processes are in terms of documentation of the processes, in terms of the training. I know probably you have interacted or you work in a company where the growth has come up exponentially. So when you are a startup, you probably start with 10 or 15 people, and you're basically the CEO or the founder is usually the all-in-one. He's the HR, he's the the QHSE, he's everything. But as the company continues to grow and to get more clients, then that rapid growth ends up affecting how the operations come about. So in this case, for prime distributors, it has affected the way their processes are documented and also the consistency of their training. Another internal issue at prime distributors is the culture. The culture has been affected in terms of underreporting of injuries and near misses. So we find that because people have not understood the processes, the documented information is out of date, and the training is also not consistent, then it affects the culture in terms of how people are able to report or understand why they need to report on the injuries. So we'll be able to look at a sample document on context as we go along, but that was just to create the scene of what is happening at prime distributors, which is our case study for today. So just to put it in context, we are talking about, in this case, the price jumps, the price of diesel jumps 20.
Yes, sorry about that. You can continue. You're audible.
Had I dropped?
No. There's an
Okay.
error.
Okay, sawa. Thank you so much. Yeah, please, if I drop, kindly just let me know. So in our case study for today, we're assuming that the diesel prices have jumped by 20% in this quarter, and NEMA has also tightened its effluent discharge limits in the same month. So we find in organizations, because these issues are coming from the external point of view, what we are calling the external issues, and they're coming to the different responsible person within the organization, they will log them or they will identify them as different, issues. So in this case, the QHSC will log it in the EMS that NEMA has tightened the effluent discharge limit or has tightened the EPR issues. Take the equivalent of the authority that works in your own country. If it is called NEMA as well, the example still fits. And for the finance team, they will log in that the diesel prices have, jumped by 20% as a cost issue. They probably will, in most cases I have seen, the finance department, will just have meetings with the CEO or, the top management and tell them there's a cost issue. They probably will even forget to note down in their tools or in their minutes that this is an issue, that it is an external issue. So for them, it's an agenda that needs urgent attention, probably of the board or of the CEO, so that a decision is made. So you see, when we're now trying to integrate it in this scenario, and as I said, we are trying to put ourselves as consultants, we would then advise them, because we want it to be in an integrated management system, and we want each and every department or section to speak to one another so that we know what is happening around us and within our organization, and not as standalone or silos. So in this case, when the next management review occurs or the next context review, depends on how the organization is structured. You could be having just review meetings for context alone, which I think is a lot. And these are the things, probably tips we can give you as consultants and as trainers and facilitators. Try not to lengthen the ISO processes or make it complicated. The moment you're having your management review, you can discuss these issues and have a closure to them rather than having multiple meetings. I could be digressing, but allow me just to speak into this. I've seen organizations where they have the IMS or the ISO management review meeting, say on Wednesday. And then the next week, they're having now their own, let's say, prime distributors, CEOs meeting, now to discuss, prime distributors issues. But that then beats the logic of why you adopted the IMS or the management systems, the ISO management systems. We should try our best to completely integrate the management systems in what we do. Yeah. Let's not separate ISO from what we do. ISO is actually what we do. We're just trying to improve it and make it better. Trying to understand what are the risks and what are the opportunities and be able to improve from that. So if you're in your organization, you usually have two sets of meetings. Have your, in this case, prime distributor meeting, quarterly meeting, where now you discuss the real issues and you're discussing profit and loss and you're discussing, I don't know, issues in terms of the competitor and all these things. And then you have another meeting where now you discuss ISO issues. Then I would really employ you to combine these two meetings, and you will see the value in integrating and incorporating the ISO issues within whatever you are doing. So back to our case study. So as you can see in this instance, the QHSC logged the NEMA issues as an EMS risk and probably discussed it with their line manager or the CEO, when the finance person held a meeting probably with the CEO and called it a cost issue. But in real sense, it is a context issue. So when you're sitting in the next management review or the context review meeting, we need this team to agree that indeed these are external issues, one coming from an economic angle and another one coming from a legal angle. And then we are able to then agree as a team, as the Prime Distributors Limited, how we are going to resolve the issues or how we are going to prepare ourselves to tackle these issues. And then we need to have to delegate who is going to be responsible over what and within which timelines. In that way, we are able to tackle these external issues. And even if there were to be internal issues, such as the one we mentioned of the staff growing from probably like 20 staff to 70 within those few years, then we'll be able to know who will do what by what time. And that is how we are able to discuss context and make use of it. So, but then probably the question you're asking, how do we identify these issues, whether external or internal? And for us, we are going to use the most common tool, not to say that there are no other tools and there are no other methodologies of doing this. There are. And the beauty about ISO standards is that it gives us the liberty to be able to do it in our own way. You can choose whichever tool or framework that is suitable for you, as long as you're able to defend the choice that you made. Yeah. So in our case, we are going to look at PESTEL and SWOT analysis as the frameworks for us to identify the issues. So for internal issues, so these are the issues that are happening within the organization, affecting our culture, affecting our resources, affecting our governance. We're going to use the SWOT analysis. So in SWOT, we call it SWOT because it represents the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. So in our cases we have discussed, we'd probably look at the number of staff growing to 70 and even, the issues of the warehouses. Probably we've added more depots or we've added more warehouses, or the fleet has grown from probably 5 trucks to 300 trucks, or the supplier network has grown, or even the client, the supplier networks has grown because of our fleet, expanding. All these things, we can categorize them as our strengths. Yeah. So in that case, we put them in the strength box. And then in terms of the weaknesses, we'd look at things like, the documentation, lagging behind, or the training also lagging behind, probably because of this rapid growth and people moving from one department to another, or people leaving the organization, maybe like what I was alluding to when I was beginning, the organizational knowledge being lost. That could be put in as a weakness. And then opportunity would be like now the ISO certification, helping us be able to get more tenders or more market share in terms of opportunities. So that for us would be an opportunity. If we as prime distributors are able to get the ISO certification in all the 3 standards, then that is an opportunity for us, and we're in control of that. Then the threat is probably the inconsistent suppliers, making our incoming material, whatever we are receiving, become non-conforming. So that then becomes a threat to us. So this SWOT analysis can help your organization, or can help prime distributors to be able to identify the internal and external, the internal issues. So, and another good thing about the SWOT analysis, it then also tries to preempt what another facilitator will come to discuss later on, where we are discussing about our risks and opportunities. So if you're able to identify, sit down as a team and really concentrate, try and, analyze completely and truthfully and honestly as an organization, what could be our strengths, what could be our weakness, what could be our opportunities, what could be our threats. If you're able to do this in a very thorough way, then this in its sense will be able to be built upon in Cloud 6 when we're doing the risk and opportunities. And I know that when we get to Cloud 6, we'll be able to debunk that as well. It was good to mention that even as we are in this planning stage of Cloud therefore, when we are trying to understand the internal and external issues, we need to do it very thoroughly, very honestly, because it will shed light to upcoming clauses. Then when we look at PESTEL is the acronym for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So in this case, it would be things, political would be like the business permits, the inspection regimes. It could also be like, for instance, here in Kenya, we are going to elections next year. So that could be a political thing. How will that affect prime distributors? You know, the distribution network and all that. Again, an example would be Kenya. In the past 2 years, we've been having maandamano. That then falls also in the political aspect. How has it affected prime distributors? Maybe on the chat box, you could also be able to tell me what are some of the political aspects or the economical, social, technical, and environmental or legal aspects that you know that could be affecting your organization or even prime distributors. When we come to economic, we're looking at things like, you know, the forex, the electricity, the fuel prices, the imports, things like that. How is the macroeconomic aspect affecting the way prime distributors operates? When it comes to social, we had alluded to, you know, the customers, the suppliers, also the community within which that organization is established. Then when it comes to technology, in the example of prime distributors, since they're in warehousing, things like warehousing management systems or barcoding of their merchandise or their materials, things like that would come into play when you're talking about technology. Things like AI, how would they use AI to better the way they manage their processes? When it comes to environmental issues, it could be issues with the packaging and what we were talking about, you know, consumer awareness. How is their packaging? Is it eco-friendly? Is it easy to recycle? Things like that. And we are saying that there's a push both from the consumers and the customers, as well as even from the government point of view. Yeah. And this is also coming into play into the ISO standards, you know, trying to put in climate change and environment, not only in the EMS scope, but also in other management systems. Then when it comes to legal, it's looking at what are the new laws and regulations that are affecting the kind of business that you do. So in this case, for prime distributors, it would be like the EPR when you're talking about the packaging. It could be the OSH in terms of occupational safety and health. What are the new laws that are coming into play? I think the most recent for us would be, you know, the first aid rules and things like that. For effluent management system, what are these new laws that are coming into play that are affecting us? So we need to sit down and look at how it affects us. So this is an example of an internal and external management, internal and external issues register. So it's whatever we've already discussed, but now in a more organized manner, whereby we're talking about what is the issue, yeah? And then what type is it? Is it an external issue? Is it an internal issue? And then what was the source? Like, which methodology did you use to identify it as an issue? Remember, as I said, ISO gives us the liberty to be able to identify, to be able to our various frameworks, various methodologies and criteria. But the catch is that we need to have you know, some background information on why did we use this? Why did we use pastel? Why did we use SWOT? Is it working for us? So if you're able to justify things like that, then you're not, then you are considered to be in conformance. So here we're trying to identify the issues and which source or which framework did we use. So there are various other frameworks that you can use, and you can be able now to put them under this column or where we are writing the source. And then what is the impact on the IMS? Yeah. And we can look at it both ways.
Hi, Gladys.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Maybe before you go to the impact, you could review the three answers. We now have a third answer. So we have Joy, we have Safari Musa, who says the political aspects include the US and Iran war, which has affected many organizations in the whole world. And Joy says political instability, national epidemic, global wars, policy change, taxi or that is tax or import regulations. And finally, the last one is from Stephen, who says government on infrastructure investment. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for contributing. Yes, those are actual, real examples. And why we are saying that the context aspect, it's not something that we just do once. It's something that we need to keep reviewing because things are changing. I think at some point we were calling it VUCA, yeah, volatile and all that. And now we have moved to other terms. Remember, the world is moving so fast. Things are changing so fast. So if you're left behind, it means you're not understanding your context. So if the wars that are happening outside of, East Africa, they're definitely affecting us. But how are they affecting us? So we need to move the conversation in the management review or whatever term you call your review process. How are they then affecting us? And what are we doing as an organization to then counter that or prepare ourselves to be able to handle these situations? That is how we make ISO come to life. But if we just put a register like this one I'm displaying currently, and we leave it at that and wait until when we are doing the certification audit and the auditor comes and goes through and sees, okay, you've identified, and then, you just assume that everything is okay, then we are losing the value with which ISO comes with. It is there to help us to be able to continually and just review every now and then what is happening around us. How is this affecting us? How are we affecting it? So we have to look at it both ways. So when there's the war in terms of Iran and Iraq and all that, and the fuel prices and issues like that, and the example I was giving about like Kenya in terms of the maandamano or the upcoming elections, things like that. How is that affecting us as an organization? How are we preparing for it? And that is what we call the planning stage. Because the moment you are in cognizance of the things happening around you and you're trying to plan around them, then it makes the management system come to life and it helps you prepare before you get to a standstill or where you are stuck. Then you move now from having a certificate that's just displayed on the wall, and you move from firefighting to an organization that is actually strategic, strategic and, forward thinking and driven by risk-based thinking. So we need to look at it in that way. What are the things that are happening around us? What are the things happening within even the organization? So let us not be blind to also the things that are happening internally. Let us not suppress the workers from talking or the middle managers from talking and telling us this is the issue that is at hand. We need to sort it. And then the last column is where we identify the owners. So once we've identified the issue and the impact that it will have on our organization, who then is supposed to take charge? Yeah, we can go further to a higher level of the register, being that we are going to give ourselves timelines and exact actions towards trying to understand how we can neutralize or manage the issues. But at this level, at the foundational level, at the very beginning, we can just start off by identifying or determining the internal and external issues. And by so doing, even at this stage, then we'll be compliant, even if an ISO auditor comes to your site. So basically, we are looking at tightening of all these issues, the NEMA issues, the fuel prices, the suppliers, the rapid growth. So as long as you're able to put them in the right place, is it an internal issue? Is it an external issue? And then what is the impact on your system and who is responsible? Let's move on quickly to the interested party. Yes. So when it come to the interested parties, and this is what we said in normal language, we call the stakeholders. So the interested parties are basically anyone who has stake or can be affected by our management system. And for ISO 45001, it goes further to ensure that workers are identified as part of the interested parties. So, and again, I'll just re-emphasize that because we are looking at an integrated management system, we said that we will pick the additional, parts that are not in the other management system. So in this regard, we are looking at the 5001 having the additional of workers being consulted and participating as interested parties. So as we are looking at our interested parties, I know we normally look at people like the regulator, we're looking at people like the suppliers, the consumers, or the customers, but we also need to zoom in on the workers. So when we take prime distributors, for instance, our interested parties would be the customers, the workers, the regulators, and these are the needs and expectations that they would come. So here, when we're talking about needs and expectations, they can be explicit, that is probably documented somewhere. So when it comes to, let's say, like the regulators, when it comes to like NEMA or DOSH or whichever other regulator, KRA, please put in the regulator in your own country, as I'm talking about, NEMA and DOSH and all that. These ones have articulated their needs and expectation specifically in the laws that they give us. When they're giving us specific laws or regulations, or they're giving out gazette notices or things like that, it's very explicit that you need to do this. So when it comes to, let's say, for effluent management, it has a specific number to it. So let's talk about probably oils and greases. It could be that when you're discharging that to the environment, it should be at 0 or at 0.5. So it's very explicit and it's written down, it's documented. Others, like the community, have not actually documented, but there are some perceptions that are there that are not quite explicit, but we need to understand those needs and expectations. Now, the good thing with some of the needs and expectations from the community or the society, some of them have been picked by the regulators on their behalf. Why am I saying so? Things like Public Health Act, choose the equivalent to your country. Things like the Environment Management Act, things like the regulators like KRA, they are trying to protect the larger community by putting in laws that can protect them. So when the Public Health Act is stating something, or KEBS, which is our regulator in terms of the quality of our products and services, when it gives out a standard by which you need to meet, let's say it's a cleaning detergent in the examples that we have for prime distributors, and it's saying this cleaning detergent should have this concentration of caustic soda or whatever, and you go beyond that, it means that you're harming, the consumer. Or when you have the Public Health Act and it's saying that we need this number of washrooms and you need to direct the waste into this kind of situation, and you need to ensure that the kind of work that you're doing does not emit probably like noise or air pollution. It's trying to protect the society or the larger community. So sometimes even the needs and expectations of the community or the society, some of them are explicit through the regulators. Then we have the customers here, of course, customers or consumers. We have probably sometimes we have the SLAs or the contracts between us and the consumers. It could be a B2B or direct consumers. It could also be not implicitly written down. It could be a perception that your brand is known for this. So in that regard, your consumer expects this level of accountability or quality. It could be suppliers where we have contracts and SLAs which are written down. When it comes to NGOs or the community, it could also be MOUs that you've done with them. Yeah. So probably you have, because of your EPR scheme, you are trying to clean up the community, and therefore you have an MOU with the neighboring community whereby at a specific period in the year, you collect the waste and you recycle it and, things like that, or you do tree planting. All these are the needs and expectations expressed in various places. So you need to come down and consolidate all this into one template and be able to write it down. So that's why we are really emphasizing that at this planning stage, we need to be very thorough. We need to be very honest. We need to come together as different teams. Remember, these needs and expectations are not coming in to the organization through one person. They could be coming in from the procurement manager, others are coming in from the QA manager, others are coming in from the CEO or the board of directors, and so on and so forth. So that's why we need to sit together as a team, and be able to bring all these issues together and be able to articulate them down and write them down so that we are able to move together as a system rather than in different silos. So in our case study, we look at customers. I think we've already covered these. Workers in this case would need things like their safety, definitely. PPE, of course, we've there, but it's at the lowest level. It would be things like, how do we eliminate the hazards? How do we identify the hazards? Are they involved in things like that? And this case study was just giving a scenario whereby in a stakeholders meeting, the organization was their QH or the manager in charge was just trying to tell the prime distributors workers about the different stakeholders or the interested parties. And during that time, one of the forklift drivers was very quick to ask, what about us as the workers? What about us? Are we not part of these interested parties? And in that, we're able to understand that the workers themselves are part of the interested parties. So if prime distributors have not identified workers as an interested party, then that would be an unconformity, especially from the 45,001 aspect. So make sure that as you're looking at all these people, you're not forgetting your workers, the key ones, the customers, the workers, the regulators, the suppliers, the board of directors, and the community, and whatever they need or they expect from us. So we have said some of them are articulated in a specific document, others are not. So the best way to do it is to be able to have the requirement type. So here you can be able to write it as contractual or legal or an expectation that is not documented anywhere. Yeah. We can go a step further to be able to or improve this by saying something like, is it a compliance issue in terms of, is it a law? And then you actually state which law. This will help you later in upcoming clauses. When you're doing your legal register, you'll just then pull from this context tool and move them to the legal register. But that is for another facilitator to cover. But as I'm saying, the moment we are doing this context very thoroughly and very honestly, and we are putting in the work in terms of planning, it will help us later in the clauses that we are going to cover. So we can, as I'm saying, at the foundation level, we can leave it at this, where we're just naming the interested party and we're naming the needs and the expectation. And then you're able to state what kind of requirement it is. And then how often do you review it? Is it something that you look at quarterly or annually or things like that? So let's say, for instance, it's like the effluent that comes from the regulators. According to the law, you should make sure that every quarter you are doing an analysis. But you could probably, the frequency or the review period is up to you. You can put it as quarterly or biannually or annually. Try and match them to whatever the needs and expectations have articulated them as, especially for the ones that are articulated in the law or in a contract. So if a contract says quarterly, then try and put the review period as quarterly so that you don't go too long or too far before having reviewed it. Yeah, it prevents you from missing some of the risks or the opportunities when it's far too gone. So that is what we can say is a sample of an interested party register. Those two, the one I showed you first and this one, make up the context tool. Now, this is just an illustration to show how the prime distributors have articulated their context in terms of the interested parties. So you can also have it in this form of diagram. What the standard requires of us is that we identify, and we determine and identify the interested parties. So as I said, we are free. You can put it in an Excel sheet, you can put it in an image format, but as long as you're able to explain and the people also within the organization understand why you're doing it in that way, then you are in conformance to the ISO standards. So here is just an illustration. So on this side, we have the internal issues as we have mentioned them, and the external issues. Don't make them generic. Try and make them very domesticated to your exact organization. Yeah. So don't just write like in the illustration, organizational culture, and then you write values, ethics. No. Try and, chambua. In Kiswahili, we say chambua. Try and look deeper. When we're talking about the organizational culture, what exactly in our culture as prime distributors is the issue, and how can we try and manage it? So this is just an overview. Then on the third part, we had said we need to look at the scope and the process mapping. That is what then makes up context of the organization, where we've looked at the external and internal issues, the interested parties, their needs and expectation, and now the last part, which is the scope and the process mapping. So the scope is basically the boundaries and the applicability of a management system. So this is the locations, the products, the services, under which the certification is covered, or under which you're able to manage or control your management system. And then the process mapping is basically trying to understand what are the key processes in your organization and how do they interact with each other. What are the key inputs? What are the key outputs? And what is the sequence under which they flow? Yeah. So for any organization, there's the way things flow from input, the incoming materials from the suppliers, who receives them first, what is done at that stage, what is the output of that first process into the input to become the input of the next process, what does this next process do with that input, and what output does it bring to the next, and so on and so forth, out until it goes to the exit where it goes to the consumer. So how do we close the loop? That is what we are calling the process mapping. So then again, we need to understand what is in our control, what is under our influence, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and who are the owners, who is responsible for that. In this case, we are assuming that Prime Distributors is headquartered in Nairobi, and it has a main warehouse at Mombasa, and then it has different depots at Nakuru, Eldoret, Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Entebbe, and Kampala, now serving the various customers or clients within East Africa. So as it's importing and warehousing and repackaging and then distributing these products and services and being able to reach its different customers, what are these processes from receiving to inspection to inventory to repackaging to labeling to order processing to dispatch up to the distribution stage? So that is what we are calling the process mapping. And then we are looking at, in terms of scope, which are these locations that Prime Distributor operates in? What are the products? We don't want to go beyond whatever they actually do. So if they are in industrial and cleaning and in industrial and facility maintenance, what are those products? It is best to go deeper and, literally name them. If it's their lubricants, greases, adhesives, go into depth and name them. And then we have the activities and then the different markets. So basically, this is in a nutshell, this is what your scope statement would probably look like. So it would read something like: the integrated management system of Prime Distributors covers the importation, procurement, receiving, inspection, warehousing, inventory management, repackaging, labeling, product kitting, order processing, dispatch, and distribution of industrial maintenance, cleaning and hygiene and facility building maintenance products, including associated customer service and supporting processes. So we've basically first described what are the processes. We've also now moving into the next part. We're trying to describe the locations at its Nairobi headquarters, Mombasa warehouse, and depots in Nakuru, Eldoret, Dar es Salaam, Arusha, Entebbe, and Kampala. Then you go ahead and describe now the different locations. So in a nutshell, these are the key processes that are in scope, that we want to be in scope of the IMS management system. Of course, as I said, we need to understand what are the products and services covered. If you're able to dig deeper and be able to actually itemize these industrial maintenance products, which ones are they? So that whenever we need to change the scope, let's say we introduce a new decreaser or a new product into the portfolio, we need then to revise this scope and be able to send it to our certification body if we need it to be included in our certificate. So we need the scope to be very detailed. We need the scope to be live, and that's why we need to keep reviewing. So in case of any changes, if Prime Distributors was to add another depot or to add another warehouse, probably add another warehouse at Dar es Salaam, then we'd need to change or review the scope and be able to send a copy to our certification body so that it can also be included in the scope when they're doing that end, translate now to the certificate. We need to understand which markets we are covering. So we need to be very articulate in whichever markets that we are covering. And then we need to understand what are the exclusions. So the word exclusions here means what are we not putting into the IMS scope. So in some cases, like for instance, prime distributors, if they do not manufacture or design, can choose to leave out of scope the clause that talks about design. If they are not into designing the products, then they can leave that out of scope, and this can now be added as an exclusion. Basically, this is how the IMS scope would look like, and it should definitely be in line with your strategic objectives, your goal, and your vision, and be able to show where exactly are your boundaries. Then when it comes to process mapping, we need to articulate what are the key inputs. So it's the imported products, it's the local suppliers, it's the regulatory requirements, it's the employees and all that. It's the utilities like the energy, the water and all that. It's also the data. All this can be put as our key inputs. And then in some cases, you can opt to add the enablers. So this could be your policy, your targets, your leadership and commitment. And then we've covered what the context is. And then now we here under the processes, we are trying to articulate which are these key processes. So when it comes to prime distributors, it could be sales and customer relations, it could be the demand planning, it could be receiving, it could be warehousing and inventory, all the way to distribution and customer support at the very end. So how do these processes then interact with one another, and what are then the support processes, which it could be the QHSC, it could be the legal team, it could be the HR process or the finance process that are not in the actual supply chain, but are there to support the functioning of prime distributors. And then at the end, we have the expected output, the satisfied customers, the protected environment in terms of reduced environmental impact, the safe products and services for our external customers, and also the safety and the health of our workers. So those are the expected outputs. So in terms of process mapping and interaction, then that is where we would, that is how we would show the interaction. So you look at each process, you look at what is the input required, what happens within that process, and what output does it result in. Common pitfalls that we see in under clause 4 and the inverse best practices would be sometimes context and the analysis of the interested parties is only done once and very generic, which does not help your organization. That's why we say we need to review it constantly as the management review, make decisions around those issues, and also check which interested party has come with more needs and expectation. What other issue has cropped up? How do we modify our business to be able to meet these needs and expectation in a risk-based thinking, be able to tackle the incoming issues, whether internal or external. So that is the only way we can be able to make our IMS come to life. Then when the scope is also copied from a template, or it's vague, or it does not reflect the actual business, then again, we are missing the point. We need to understand exactly where is our scope as prime distributors. Where do we draw the boundaries? Where is our our IMS applicable? Yeah. Is it applicable in our Mombasa depot? Is it applicable in our Entebbe depot? If it is not, we need to state, why. Why is it not part of the scope? Yeah. And why have we drawn the boundary as such? If it is specific products that we want only the lubricants to be in scope and we don't want the cleaning detergents to be in scope, why then are we choosing that? So we need the scope to be alive and in plain language and to be able to be understood by the users. I was mentioning about the workers. Sometimes we usually leave out the workers, but remember, if we are going to incorporate 45,001, it is an explicit requirement that they are part of the interested parties. So you can get an unconformity if you have not determined workers as an interested party if you are adopting ISO 45,001. In the next clause, as we are going to be covering, apart from just identifying them as interested parties, how then do you collect their views and their issues? So that then is the next level of auditing, where we're not just asking, have you identified or have you determined the workers? We need then to also understand, how did you get these issues from the workers? Then the last one is not recognizing climate change. In 2024, there was an amendment made by ISO to all the standards to include the issues of climate change. So it is now not only applicable to 14,001, it's also applicable to 9,001 and even 45,001. So we need to understand the issues of climate change, the issues of environment, things about like pollution control. How are they affecting our organization and how are we affecting the world around us? Because essentially environment is what surrounds us, yeah? So we need to determine climate change as part of our context, as our issues, and also determine the interested parties linked to that issue of climate change. So please don't look at it like it's a big mountain, to surmount. Remember, even the small steps you're taking as a company, changing from fluorescent to LED lights in order to save your energy, that is helping the environment. It's contributing to climate change. When you are doing carpooling or you have what is it called? The staff buses, yeah? And you're moving towards electrical vehicles, that is a contribution to climate change. When you're changing your packaging material, either reducing the number of layers or using more recyclable materials like the transparent or clear plastics, the PET, that is also small steps towards it. Things like tree planting, please don't leave them out when you're doing your context. Even if they may seem small, they are still contributing to the issues of. So make sure that you are able to identify what you're contributing or what climate change is contributing towards the organization. So the question asked about inclusions and exclusions. I want to make reference slightly, but because I don't want to go in depth, the facilitator who is going to do clause 8 may emphasize on this a bit more. So for instance, for prime distributors, we have said they do imports and then they repackage whatever is in bulk. So let's take the case of greases or cleaning material. Then they repackage and resell now as smaller units. See, they're not coming up with the design and the development, like the design of those lubricants. They don't have the R&D section, if I was to put it like that, for those lubricants. It's coming from outside. So for that, in that case, they can exclude ISO 9001, they can exclude clause 8.3.6, the design and development part. So that whole part of 8.3, they can put it as an exclusion because they don't deal with the R&D bit of making the actual detergents or the greases and all that. So that can be an exclusion. Also, if probably I've seen cases where organizations do not want to go full throttle with the IMS or the management system certification, like to cover their entire company. So they start off probably with their manufacturing section. So for instance, it's a manufacturing plant. They can start off with the production line, the actual processing plant. get that certified, and then later expand to now the organization in terms of their depots or their warehouses and things like that. So that is what we are calling the exclusions. So anything that we will not cover under the IMS system and then translating to the certificate is what we are calling an exclusion. But the catch here is, in as much as we are allowed to have the exclusion, we need to justify why are we excluding. So in the case of prime distributors, because they don't have the R&D part of the company to formulate the detergents and the degreasers and all that, it's not their work. It's usually probably done in China or whatever, and they just get that product when it's complete and then they repackage. They can exclude from one, they can exclude 8.3, the design and development. So in their certificate, that will never be audited. I hope it's clear. Maybe, Paul, you can ask the person who asked if they can give a thumbs up. And also, if there's any facilitator who can speak on, towards that, you are also free to add.
Thanks once again, Gladys. Please, everyone, you're welcome. Those who have just joined in, this is our masterclass week. This is day one of our after dark sessions, and we are on clause 4 and 5 with Madame Gladys Wanjao. The questions that we have so far, I'll just run through them. We have one from Charity. Here, she's excited to hear and expected to learn more about how to implement the ISO standards at the workplace. Yes, this is an appreciation. Thank you, Charity. And Joy is saying she looks forward to this refresher and application success. Thank you, Joy. We have Evelyn. Yes, she's also expectant to learn. And Milton asks, she thanks us for the facilitation, asks what evidences are needed to demonstrate compliance with clauses 4 and 5. Should I read all at once, or we can have one by one?
I can just quickly run through that one. For clause 4, remember we are being told to determine the context of the organization. So it can be in the form of a register, like the sample I showed. Maybe I can just go back very briefly. Yeah, it could be in an Excel format. Yeah, it could, as I said, the point ISO makes is that you're free. You're at liberty to make it in whichever format, as long as you're able to demonstrate the requirement of the clause and how you came about it. Yeah. So it could be in an Excel format, like the registers we did. Yeah. Or in an image, or in the digital era, you could be having probably a video that explains who are your interested parties and what are the internal and external issues. Basically, they are looking at, have you identified the internal and external parties? And also now the scope. The scope needs to be articulated. As I demonstrated, you can have it in, the image I showed, or it could be a Word document that we've actually articulated everything, like what are the locations, what are the processes. It could be in Excel. It depends on what your organization prefers, which framework or which criteria you choose. But the point is, have you been able to demonstrate the requirements of the standard, which is basically, have you identified your internal and external issues? Have you identified your interested parties, their needs and their expectations? And then have you also now determined the scope? And have you also shown your process mapping, the interactions between the different processes, and which ones you control and which ones you have influence over? I hope I have answered.
Yes, please. In case the answer is not sufficient, you can go ahead and add another comment on the chat. I thank you all for the contributions. I see the engagement is going on in the chat. Our next question, Joanna, do we have any more?
Yes, thank you, Paul. We actually have a question from Michael. He asked, as an internal auditor, do I audit this clause 4.1 during a departmental audit?
Yes. Remember, the internal auditor is the internal eyes before the external eyes come. So I don't know if it's the same with all the East African countries, but here in Kenya, we usually have a mock exam before the main national exam. So look at it in that way. And most of the times in Kenya, the mock exam is usually more difficult than the external exam. So you being the internal auditor, because you understand your context, you already know, the issues where they lie. You should be more thorough and more keen and more strict, in looking at clause 4 and 5 and all the other clauses as we are going to be covering before the external auditors come. So yes, the long and short of it is yes. As an internal auditor, as you're looking at the departmental files, try and look, have they identified or have they determined these internal and external issues? Now, point to note, in as much as I'm saying yes, I've seen organizations taking two routes to this. There are some organizations that do it at department level first, so that each department has already identified their context, their internal issues, the external issues, their interested parties, and what their needs and expectations are. And then, at the management review, these heads of department come together, and then it is consolidated at that level by one person, probably the IMS coordinator or the QHSC, depending. So he has picked from all these departments and then culminated as one organizational context tool. In other organizations, and most likely these smaller ones, the ones which are less than probably 70 people, you're sitting together as the heads of department at the MR meeting, or even before the MR. It's best to do it before the MR. You're consolidating all these internal and external issues, interested parties, their needs and expectation, and coming up with one register. Yeah. So it depends on the dynamics of the organization. So if they've chosen departmental level, pin them harder, to make sure that it's very domesticated to HR, very domesticated to finance. Make sure that they are really telling you who the interested parties are. If it is consolidated together and they all share one context tool, test if they have an understanding of the context of the entire organization. I hope I'm clear. So if they are doing it as silos first, pin them down on, are they understanding really? If the finance person is not able to tell you how the Iraq was, he has written they are affecting them, pin them down. Yeah. But if they're doing it globally, it's a small organization, they're doing it globally, and then that document is shared among them. Try and understand, is the finance understanding the context in terms from the side of QHSE or HR or, so far and so like that. But in a nutshell, yes, you need to audit.
Wow, thank you so much, Gladys. This has been very insightful and interesting. I can see questions are still coming up. Let's have the questions still come up. We are going to take a short break. Allow me invite Mr. Douglas from Shaw to be able to tell us about the ESC conference. As we have our break, then we shall be able to proceed with the clause 5 after. Just keep your questions coming in, then we shall be able to tackle them after. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bete and Ronald and the presenter for this opportunity. Thank you for this opportunity. And with this, at this moment, I wanted to bring to your attention the inaugural East African OSH conference that is going to happen. That is next week on 27th to 28th of August at the Imperial Hotel that is in Kampala. You are all warmly welcome. This is stretching from professionals in offices, managers, professionals, those who are practicing, those who are just maybe partaking in the different activities in offices and any other facilities or factories. Yes, attached are the fees that are going to be paid or that are supposed to be paid. And we are warmly welcoming you from, that is from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, around the East African community, and even those other delegates from outside East Africa. And I see we have a bigger population here, and I hope to see each and everyone. Yes, I'm going to go through. In case you want to sponsor, we have some sponsorship packages. That is from Platinum, Gold sponsorship, Silver, Bronze, Emerald, Standard, as well as an exhibition booth.
Yes. Then also we have the East African Conference OSH magazine, where we have the different advertising fees depending on the pages that you can afford. So we have a 3-page spread too. We have a full page, back cover, inside, the front cover, then half page, quarter page. I will definitely share this chat such that people follow up, as well as the links to the conference page. Our theme is building resilient and inclusive workplaces. That is OSH for formal and informal economies. And this is organized by SHAU, that is Safety and Health Association of Uganda, then Westpac, as well as TOHASA.
Thank you, Douglas. Yes, we invite all the questions. However, we shall have a session at the end of the presentation. We are halfway into our session. Thank you all for attending. Once again, I invite you to keep the conversations going. We have very good contributions in the chats. Continue to introduce yourselves. Douglas, if there is no addition, we shall invite you also at the end to answer some of the questions that the attendees are asking right now.
Thank you. I will be on till the end.
Wonderful. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just to do some housekeeping once again as we wait for the facilitator to get back to us. We're having quite a number of things for sharing the invite. Currently, we have recording people from different countries. We have those from Uganda, Zambia, Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Qatar, Ghana, and many more are yet to come. As we run down in our 5-minute break, we encourage you can stand up, stretch your legs, and get ready for the next session of the masterclass, the ISO Masterclass Week. I go by the names of Paul Chana, your co-moderator. I'm here with Joanna Amanyire, and we're glad to have you with us today.
Allow me invite our speaker, that's Gladys. She's going to take us through Clause 5. So be ready to understand the leadership commitment, the integrated policies, the roles and responsibilities, the worker consultation and participation. Just have your pen and paper on and be able to put in your questions in the chat, and we shall be able to handle them. Thank you very much. You're most welcome, Gladys. She's already set and ready.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you so
session.
much. I really hope the pace is okay. Maybe I can get the participants giving me a thumbs up if the pace and the clarity is okay. Just to engage you guys. Okay, I can see a few thumbs up. So thank you for that. In case I go too fast, and always use the chat box and Paul or Joanna will reach out to me. So just a quick check on what we've done under Clause 4. For those ones who are coming in right now, we are doing the ISO Masterclass Week, and we are covering 3 standards. That is ISO 9001 for quality, ISO 14001 for environment, and ISO 45001 for occupational safety and health. And we're doing them as an integrated management system. And for today, which is Monday, the first day, we are doing Clause 4 and 5, which we are calling the foundation. And then tomorrow up to Friday, we'll be able to finish off up to Clause 10. So we were covering Clause 4 in the first hour. And just a quick check, maybe we can write in the chat box, true or false. Once documented, the organization context does not need revisiting until recertification. Is this true or false? I hope people are answering on the chat. True or false? Just write true or false.
We see everyone is voting B, false. I don't see anyone voting true.
Great. So yes, it's false. As we said, we need to review the context every now and then because things are changing and we want the management system in our organization to remain alive. See, if we just write it once and we forget about it and put it in the shelf, waiting for the certification or the recertification, apart from probably getting an unconformity, it is also not serving its purpose. We are underutilizing the ISO management system. So this clause, it is supposed to help us in planning It's supposed to help us in projecting for future clauses. As I mentioned, one key one being the risk and opportunities, another one being the operations. Yeah, and we will be able to link this as the other facilitators come on in the upcoming days. So we need to properly sit and really focus as we are doing the context of the organization. But at the same time, I've seen a question asking, should we do it by ourselves or should we do it using a consultant to be able to do the SWOT analysis or the PESTEL? Kindly don't make ISO complicated. I know it's counterintuitive because I'm a consultant and I should be asking for these jobs, but also don't make it very complicated. I need you to be real. Be real with yourselves as an organization. Go into your different departments. Just get sticky notes. Yeah, I'm sure every organization has a room, and a room has 4 walls. Get your sticky notes, get your charts, get your blackboards or whiteboards, and let the people write S on one wall, W on another, all the way to T, SWOT. Then try and ask people, even during your EHS or toolbox meetings, try and ask people, what do you think is the strength of company XYZ, being your company now or your organization? What do you think is our weakness as a company? What do you think is a threat? What do you think is an opportunity? Yeah. And let those answers come out. You can have this exercise running for a week, whereby you're just getting input from people, all the way from the shop floor to the managers, to the top managers, to the middle managers, and you're just writing them down, whoever is the IMS coordinator or the heads of department, collecting and collating this data. And with AI, it's able to make this work a bit even easier. Yeah, you could do even QR codes, yeah, as a way to a Google form, and then you post the QR codes. People scan and give you input on what they think the strength of an organization is. If you still don't feel you are able to, then you can have a consultant to guide you through the SWOT analysis or the PESTEL analysis. But kindly, let us not make ISO complicated. Let us make it simple and real at our different organizations. I will not ask the live poll on the climate change. Maybe you do this a bit later. But at the back of your mind, I want you to ask yourself, because now it is a serious requirement in all ISO standards. Have you considered climate change under the context? Just to recap again, context, we are having 3 things. We are having the internal and external issues. We are having the interested parties, their needs and expectations. And we are having the scope and the process mapping and interactions. So those 3 things are the key highlights of context. And it doesn't matter which format you're using to articulate these things. It just matters that you have actually sat down and determined. The word is determined. Have you identified that? Is it ringing? Is it alive in the organization that you're in? Are you able to tell how exactly this interested party is interested in your organization? That is how you need just to explain. So whether you will do it via a video or you will do it in an illustration or Word or Excel sheet, the key point is not the format in which you display it. The key point is, are you able to articulate what are your issues? Yeah. So let's not complicate it. Just make it simple and make it relevant to your organization. Now we are entering into clause 5. And here we are going to be at the very heart of the IMS. In as much as we have dubbed the two topics or the 2 clauses as the foundation, at Indelible Impact, we like to call the leadership or the clause 5 the heart of the IMS. Because once the heart stops beating, the organization dies. Or once a normal heart stops beating, the individual is then considered dead. So if the leadership is not, alive, is not pumping the blood, the resources, and all these things that we are going to be looking at under support in clause 7 once we get to that day. If it's not doing what it's supposed to be, then the IMS will be dead. So I like to really put a lot of pressure on leadership. I don't know if you are able to capture some of the statements that were going through the video. I probably will be able to recap as you revisit the recordings and be able to understand what leadership truly is. So in the ISO standards, the leadership here is not just about delegating the IMS to a QHS officer or an IMS coordinator. That is not what is intended in the ISO standards. It is whereby the leadership needs to take full control and accountability of everything that is happening. They need to be able to be at the very center of everything. Because first of all, they're the ones who are leading, they're the ones who are giving the strategic direction. Yeah, remember we talked about strategic direction in clause 4, because once we have identified the context, we have to relate it to our strategic direction. So who is this who is giving this strategic direction? It is the leadership. So they need to be at the very driver's seat, at the helm of, steering that organization towards its purpose, its vision, towards its objectives. They need to be at the forefront. Number 2, they are what Mel Gibson has said, they are the weather. They are the ones who determine the culture of the organization. So if the leadership is not taking safety seriously, and safe work to them is a non-issue, then that will be the culture of the organization. They act as the weather of or the climate of the organization. Then leadership then has to give the resources and the support, which I said we will cover in clause 7. I will not go into that. So in our case study for prime distributors, we are taking the assumption that the managing director, who is there in the picture, the lady in the picture, has been able to chair the IMS quarterly management reviews and has not delegated to the QHSE. She's able to go through not just the management review meetings, but also get to the ground. You can see her doing the Gemba walks within the warehouse. She's able to interact with the workers. Yeah. She's able to set the objectives at the strategic level. She's able to, question when things are not going well. She's able to translate whatever is happening at the management review to the board level so that they can be able to sign off on the budgets and everything. And it's not now just about her signing off the IMS policy, but living it. Yeah, leading from the front so that she's able to be seen, even as she talks about safety or quality or environment. She's really committed, and not just on paper, but through her actions. So we can look at an example. So for 2 years, the prime distributors EHS committee meeting was being run by the QHSC manager alone. And then the QHSC manager was then giving the update to the managing director or the CEO and giving them the minutes to sign and all that. But during the ISO 45 gap assessment or the certification audit, the auditor asks, who challenges these numbers that are being discussed in the meeting? So during the meeting, remember the QHSC also has a part to play in terms of displaying the safety dashboard, right? So he cannot question himself. Yeah. In as much as the EHS committee is 50-50% in terms of management and workers, sometimes some brave workers can question, why are we not doing this? Why is this happening? Why are the injuries going up and things like that? But remember, if there is no top person, the very top, the MD or the CEO, if they're not questioning the numbers, then the strength of that committee, or even in another instance, if it is the management review, it will lack that rigor. It will lack that push to be able to make sense to the company. And I believe on Friday, as the next facilitator will be explaining, the importance of leadership being vocal and having that say in the MR. So in this example, the issue is that in as much as the QHSCS was sharing and they were really complying, they were doing their quarterly meetings, they were submitting them to the regulator, who in Kenya is DOSH. I don't know, you can write for me in the chat box who the regulator in your different countries is in terms of safety and health. In Kenya, we call them DOSH. I don't know if in Uganda, in Tanzania, and I also don't know if we have more people outside East Africa. Probably you have people outside East Africa. You can also tell us the country you are in and the regulator. So here in Kenya, DOSH, under using the Occupational Safety and Health Act, demands, and this was also the spirit of ISO, demands that the topmost person chairs the EHS committee. But it also gives a leeway to delegate. So now, as much as it's a compliance issue, it is also an ISO conformance issue. Yes, it's being done, but is it done at its very best? So when we are looking at who questions the numbers, who questions the performance, because the QHSC will only report what he has already compiled, or what he's managing, what is in his docket. But then who questions his performance? Who questions the performance of the committee? So that is why it's paramount for the leadership to take charge of even the HS committee or the MR review meetings. So the improvement here would be that the MD should now start from the next quarter, come to chair or co-chair the EHS committee meeting, and also at that point be able now to give clarity even in terms of budget or things within the support docket of the top management. They can be able to answer better rather than, sending the QHSC with the issues, and then it becomes a really long route. I totally understand the dynamics of big companies and the challenges and all that. It could be easier for the smaller organizations to adopt that. But again, it then begs the question, if your company is too big and too busy to be able to attend, you as the CEO, you're too busy, you're too occupied with getting clients or whatever CEOs and MDs do, and you're not able to chair the EHS committee meetings or the MR meetings, then are we really taking safety into the seriousness it deserves? Are we really taking the ISO management systems with the seriousness they deserve? So those are the questions we need to ask ourselves as people in different organizations. Then the second aspect of clause 5, which is 5.2, is the policy. So here, because under what we are discussing, it's an integrated management system, we will not look at the policy as individual policies. Instead, we will take all the requirements from the 3 policies and put them together into one integrated management policy. A question has been asked on the chat: is it better for an organization to adopt them together as an integrated management system, or put them separately and get different certificates? My perspective, and I welcome other facilitators as they take charge of the different days to answer this question. From my perspective, it would be best to have the integrated management system from the get-go as early as practically possible. If you're able to get it right from that stage, you're really killing many birds with one stone. Apart from the issues of costing, because I know that one will be a tick when it comes to the top management and the finance department, where you are saving money, they will definitely approve. The other issue is mainly about risk management, because we will be looking at risk not just from one angle, but it will have a 360 overview, where the risks emanating from environment, risks emanating from quality, risks emanating from occupational safety and health are being looked at all under one roof, and we're able to tackle them together rather than in a siloed manner. So I would really emphasize that organizations try their very best to have integrated management system. It may not be these 3 that we are tackling. For you, it could be your food processing company. So for you, it could be integrated management system in terms of food safety and quality or things like that. So look at which sector you are in and which management systems are relevant to you. But why we usually use these 3 standards as the IMS, as the main IMS, it's because they are applicable to all organizations. Yeah. So you can then add on additional ones like the energy one or the food safety one and so on and so forth. But it would be best to have them integrated and for all the departments to be able to be integrated into this process. So as we mentioned, 45,001 also adds issues of the hazard identification and the reduction of occupational safety and health risks. It also very much focuses on consultation and involvement of workers. And so that should be included in your policy. What is your commitment towards that? When it comes to 14,001, there should be a commitment towards protecting the environment. When it comes to quality, definitely it's the promise to the consumers that whatever you're giving them is that you're doing it right the first time. So It shouldn't be something that is just written once and signed off and people don't understand what it says. It should be something that can be recalled, something that is alive in the organization. So our case study or our example here is in an internal audit, 3 staff were asked to explain one thing about the IMS policy at prime distributors. And they were really fumbling on what to say. I know many companies usually have the policy and it's displayed probably at the reception or even at the warehouse or the production area, but no one really tells them what it says, what it means, how it applies to them. As we go through this clause, we will realize that that is an unconformance, because if people are not able to relate with it, people are not able to, and I'm not talking about recite it like the way we do the national anthem or the way we do prayers. No, I'm not talking about memorizing. I'm saying taking it to heart and understanding the heart of that policy. It should be clearly communicated. It should be understood. It should be easy to remember, easy to be reflected within the organization. So in this case, because the people who are asked, the 3 staff were asked, one could actually not say anything. 2 of them tried to fumble and all they could remember was safety first. So here the improvement that the consultant gave is to try and pick out the key highlights of the main policy statement and put it in the keywords. You can see the image on this side, where it just puts it in one breath. For prime distributors, when they're talking about the IMS, they're talking about quality. It's getting it right the first time. When they're talking about environment, they're talking about using their resources wisely and reducing on waste. And then on safety is that everyone goes home safely. And then people, it's about consulting them and building the enough competence. So with this can be able to, it's easier for people to remember, people to understand, people to emulate and be able to use it within their daily work. So one of the tricks that auditors actually use is exactly what has been put here. We usually go to the site and we are able to just randomly ask, can you tell us something about the policy? And here we're not talking about you trying to just memorize and give me word for word what the policy states. The question could be phrased, tell me something about your policy. The question could be phrased, what does the policy mean to you in your work? Or how do you implement the policy in your day-to-day work? Yeah. So we're trying to see, is there an understanding? Is there a relation between whatever is posted on the wall and the day-to-day running of the workers? So even as we are the IMS coordinators, the CEOs or the MDs at the companies, and we're trying to formulate these policies, in as much as we are looking at us ensuring that it meets the standard requirements, let us also make it simple enough for it to be absorbed by our workers. Let us ensure that we are communicating it and that we are able to, yes, to demonstrate that they are understanding what is within the policy. So this is just a simple sample. Maybe in the comments you can tell me what are the key components that you have seen in your own policy. Yeah, I don't know. And then you can tell me which standards that you're using in your organization. If it is 9,000, if it is all of them, if it is others which we are not discussing this week, just tell me what you remember about your policy. What are some of the key highlights? Not whatever is really written inside word for word, but what are the key highlights within the policy? Paul or Joanna, you can take lead on that in terms of reading out the comments.
Thank you so much, Gladys. Could we have some answers, like what policies are you using within your organization? You can engage in the chat. Let us know the key components you have seen in your policy and which standards you're using. Come on, we have over 181 attendees. I expect us to be lively because we have been engaging. We have been able to share. Yes, I have an answer from Chidosit. As she says the IMS policy. Thank you very much. Nsuga Ronald, IMS. Thank you. Deborah Kamgisha says health and safety policy, 45,001. Frank says the IMS, we have zero harm, mainly using 45,001 on HR policy. Joy Birunji, transport policy, communication policy, procurement policy. Yes, keep them coming. Dennis, commitment to safety systems of work. 45 says the HSE policy. Paul says OSH and quality policy. Daniel says, no way. I don't know what that means. But yeah, Faith says the IMS. Yeah, organizer says substance abuse policy. We also have safety policy. Yeah, ISO 45001 main components. We also have from Jacob Ngom, alcohol and drugs policy. We have sexual harassment policy, IMS, OSH policy. Yes. Douglas says the ISO implementation policy. Daniel said include objectives. Thank you very much. HIV AIDS policy. Kalule says they follow the Total Energies 12 golden rules. Michael says his organization, QSIL, has 2 policies, and that's the EHS and quality policy. We have David saying PSES policy, gender policy, safety first, IMS policy. We also have the food safety policy. From Sharon, Clinton is asking, what are those? So our Gladys is going to help us know what those are. Thank you, Clinton. We have a seatbelt policy from Ronnie. Yeah, keep them coming. We have IMS policy from Samuel. Nicholas Chitaka says they centered on integrity and sustainability. Yes, Clinton, you're right. But Gladys is going to help us know what those are because he finds some of the policies funny. Yes, I love that we are actually so open and straightforward. We have Iliab saying the legal policy. Anthony says the safe working authority policy. Davis claims that some are making up their own. I don't think so. But Jonathan says the safety 5001 environmental policy too. Yes. So far, that's what we have. We also have the environment protection policy, as Jeffrey says. Yes. Thank you very much for engaging. Keep the engagements coming on. That's so lovely. And yeah, we really appreciate. Over to you, Gladys.
Thank you, Joanna. So very interesting answers. From the answers, I can definitely tell which organizations have implemented which standards. I can tell who are lost. And thank you for your honesty. Maybe just to take a step back, when we are doing these discussions on the ISO policy, the ISO policy, I know there are many other policies within an organization. And I think the most popular ones are usually the HR policy, because immediately you get onboarded or immediately you're told, oh, congratulations, you are now part of company XYZ and you passed your interview. I think the first person you interact with is the HR, and they usually give you the HR policy so that you don't do, awkward things in the organization and, all that. But now we're not talking about those departmental or process policies where you're talking about the procurement policy, the HR policy, and things like that. We are trying to implement the ISO 9001, 5001, and ISO 14001. So for those companies that have already been certified, it means at the very beginning, you had already shown the external auditors those policies. So you need to go back to your organization. If you usually see an ISO certificate displayed in your organization, that you are ISO 9000 certified, ISO 14000 certified, ISO whatever certified, you need to go and check if you also have a policy for that specific standard. So the policy is basically a commitment, it's a commitment. It's a statement of commitment done by the topmost person in the organization to show that they are committed to meeting the requirements of the specific standard they want to be certified towards. So if it is QMS only, then you will have a quality policy. If it is combined, then you will have the IMS policy, showing that you're committing to meet the requirements of all the 3 standards. But if you are completely new to the ISO space and you want your organization to be ISO certified, then the first step is to create or document this or establish this policy? And where will you get the requirements of what is needed to be in that policy? Then you will go to your specific standard and open clause 5.2, where it articulates the policy. In all the standards, it is at 5.2. So what happens? All these standards made by ISO, they have tried to harmonize so that the clauses, whatever we are discussing through this week, okay. In other words, people would be calling them chapters, or if it was an ordinary book, like the way we say the chapters of the Bible and we say Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. So now when it comes to ISO, we call them clauses. Yes? So the clauses within the ISO standard, and they have tried to harmonize these clauses so that all the ISO standards have 10 clauses. Out of these 10 clauses, we have the auditables clauses and the ones for just information. So when you open your standard, whichever standard it will be, when you start from 1 or 1, 2, and 3, it is just for information. It gives you an introduction. Part 3 gives you the acronyms, and it explains to you the different terminologies, what they would mean under this ISO system. So what would it mean to say interested parties? What would it mean to say continual improvement? So it gives you that term and the explanation under clause 3. So clause 1 to 3 is not auditable. You just use it for understanding. You just use it for you to understand what the ISO standard is about. Then now from clause 4 to 10, which is what we are covering today up to Fridays, those are what we are calling the auditable clauses. So clause 4 and 5 is what we are covering today, and the other facilitators will take through the other clauses as we go along through the. So for clause 5, when we're talking about leadership, there is a sub clause, which is now the 5.2, that talks about the policies. So here, when we're talking about the policy, it tells you what should we incorporate when we're writing this commitment statement. If we are committed to adhering to or conforming to ISO 9001 or all of them, the 3 standards, this is what we need to commit to. So it gives you a breakdown on what needs to be written or needs to be stated. And those are what we expect to be in the body of the policy statement. Now, remember from the example I've shown you there, the topmost person has the topmost accountability. So they're the ones to sign off and write their name, their designation, the date, and the next review, yeah? And according to which ISO standard revision they are committing to. But we usually say that in as much as, for example, Grace Mwai at Prime Distributors is the one who has signed off that commitment, the moment she has signed off, it means you, as the worker, you have also signed off that you are committed to conform and comply to that standard. So that is what a policy is. A policy is basically that commitment to be able to comply to the requirements of whichever standard you are going to be certified towards. I hope it's clear for those ones who are a bit lost on what a policy is. And so in this case, because we're using the 3 standards and we're calling it an integrated management system, then we are going to have an integrated policy, integrated quality, environment, and occupational safety and health policy. And then we are going to gather all the requirements from the 3 standards, put them in a language that is suitable or adaptable to prime distributors. What do we commit to do when it comes to preventing pollution? What do we commit to do when it comes to protecting our workers? What do we commit to do when it comes to producing quality products and services? What do we commit towards in terms of compliance, in terms of the legal obligations and things like that? And all this is what then is put in that policy document, and then it is signed off by the topmost person, and of course dated, and the next review is normally documented, either on the policy or in another document. So that is what the policy statement is. I hope that is clear. Maybe I can get a thumbs up for people from the ones who are a bit lost, so that I can know if we are still together or you are still lost in terms of what the policy is before I move on to 5.3. Any reaction, any thumbs up? There was one who was saying they are a bit lost. Great. So 5.3 is the last part when it comes to the clause on leadership and commitment. So it talks about our roles, our responsibilities, and our authorities. So in as much as we are saying the top management takes the most accountability and is responsible over everything, we know that they can't work alone in an organization. And I can demonstrate this through the organizational chart, for instance. So we have the CEO or the MD, and then we have the next line of management, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the shop floor. So who then are these people that we have assigned these roles and responsibilities, and what authorities do they have? So we need to be very clear on who is next in doing what, who can approve what, who is responsible over what. And sometimes we use what we call the ACI matrix. ACI being who is responsible, who is accountable, who needs to be communicated to, and who needs to just be informed. So R is responsible, A is accountable, C is communicate, and I is inform. So we need to know if it is a first aider, what is their responsibility, what is their role, and what is their authority. If it is a production manager, what is their role, what is their responsibility, what is their authority, so that we don't have conflict and we also don't have duplication of roles, and also that we ensure that all the ISO requirements are being met by someone. Because once we leave something open and it's not delegated to anyone, it most likely will not be done. Yeah. So we need to know who is accountable, what is the reporting, format and all that, and what are the different roles and responsibilities. This can be demonstrated through the organizational chart. This can be demonstrated through your JDs. I know someone was asking which documents will the auditor come to check under the different clauses. So when it comes to leadership and commitment, they will look at your organizational chart. How have you structured everything? They will take samples of your JDs, picking here and there of different roles just to see if you have articulated the roles correctly, you have assigned the right responsibilities and authorities, and you've covered all the issues required in the different standards. So those are some of the items that we look for when we are auditing clause 5. We'll also look at, sometimes we may, stretch a bit and look at trainings done. For instance, when we're talking about the policy, we'll check, do you train the staff members or the shop floor about the policy? And is there evidence of that? Because we're trying to gauge, was it communicated, was it understood? And that's why when we get to the ground, we usually ask random people, through interviews, tell me something about the policy. That is also one way of checking if the policy is communicated and understood and applied. Others is just through observation. So let's take an example of a waste manifest or a waste tracking document. So because Prime Distributors is handling hazardous waste, like the lubricants and the degreasers and all that, those ones are considered as hazardous waste. So who then signs off the waste that is being transported from Prime Distributors to probably the disposal site? Yeah. So the NEMA inspector asked who authorized the approval, and the warehouse supervisor said, usually whoever is around. Do you see that there is a de-link in terms of who is responsible or who is accountable and who is responsible? When you give such a statement, then the auditor knows that there is a gap in the system or in the process. It can't just be anyone, because what if the supervisor has sick or something like that, and then is a shop floor supposed to then sign off that waste manifest? Are they able to take accountability and responsibility if something was to go wrong? So supposing you have a waste handler and they've now come for the hazardous waste, and the shop floor is the one who has signed off, and the waste goes, is coming from probably their Entebbe depot all the way to probably like Arusha or whatever for disposal or something like that. And along the way, there is some spillage or something like that. Will this shop floor who signed off the waste manifest be accountable or responsible? The answer is no. So there is a gap in that structuring, and that way of managing the responsibility and authority. So the improvement here would be to come up with this RACI matrix, be able to break down completely that process and be able to understand. And this can also even be done simply through the SOP, where you're articulating exactly who's responsible for signing off documents at which level. So probably for the waste manifest, the QHSC manager is the one who has the topmost authority to sign off. But in case he's not there, either the QHSC assistant can do it or the warehouse supervisor, and it should be articulated somewhere, written down, documented. Because in ISO we say if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. If it's something like permits to work, I know when we were getting feedback, people talked about safe working systems policy, zero harm policy. The policy is a good thing. It gives the overview, the general overview. It's a blanket cover. But when you get to the nitty-gritties of how actually we are going to protect the worker through probably the permit to work, who is this who is supposed to sign off that permit to work? Who is the authorized person? Who is the responsible person? And if they are not there, who steps in to sign it off? So these are the things that we will look at as auditors, both internal and external, as we are going through the system implementation. If it's supplier approval, who signs it off? Yeah. And it's not just about signing off documentation. Who has authority to stop unsafe work? If you're talking about stop work orders, if you're in a production plant and something is going wrong, a machine is about to hurt someone, who has the authority to stop the work? Is it all the workers? Is it just at the supervisor level? Is it documented somewhere? If a worker was to stop the line to save a life, would they be reprimanded? Because probably in your SOP you've written it's only the supervisor who has authority to do that. So those are the things we need to look at when we're looking at the organizational roles and responsibility. We also look at who is reporting to who is reporting to who, how is that information moving from top to bottom and bottom to top. Yeah, because as we are doing the work, it is not the managers who do the actual operations. It is the operators in the shop floor. How then do they record those performances? How is that report cascaded to the top to reach the very top, even to the board level? And how is the feedback brought back down all the way to the shop floor? So this is what we are looking at when we're looking at the roles and responsibilities clause. Then this 5.4 is very unique to 45,001. It is not in the other standards, that is 14 and 9,000. It is only unique to 45,001. We are talking about clause 5.4, which is consultation and participation of workers. We said that workers are at the center of ISO 45,001. So we need not only to involve them or consider them when we're looking at the interested parties, but we need to consult them and ensure they participate as we are doing the ISO implementation. Maybe from the chat box, someone can tell me the difference between consultation and participation. Someone quick enough to probably, or even raise your hand and just mention the difference between consultation and participation, because there is a difference. Whenever you're ready, an answer, Joanna. Yes, Belinda?
Say, for example, you are introducing something new, a new system, or something that the workers need to adjust to. You'd want to ask them, so that way you're consulting from them if it will even work. Once you're done with that and the system is introduced, if it's anything to do with, for example, the closest I would give is during the toolbox, it shouldn't just be the managers speaking at the workers. You encourage them to participate. If it's any change aspect or activity taking place, you let them participate. If it's to do with reporting, in as much as it could be a local legal requirement, you let them participate in reporting different observations or things that are not going right, but also participate in giving the responses or the answers or corrections that would help, because many times they actually know what exactly is going wrong within their tasks or the work area.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Let's give a hand to Belinda. A virtual hand clap to Belinda, kindly. Thank you so much. So the main difference between consultation and participation, consultation is seeking the views before you make a decision. And then participation is as the implementation of the decision is ongoing, you're trying to now involve them in that decision-making process. Like what Belinda has said, there's a new thing that is coming up. There's an introduction of a new law or a new requirement, or there's a new machine that is coming up. Before you bring the new machine, you have to consult the workers. So consultation comes before whatever change is happening. Yeah. And then the participation comes during this decision-making process. You're involving them continually through the decision-making process. And I loved what Belinda said, because the workers know the issues that affect them. You see, they're the ones who are actually on the ground, and they're the ones doing the actual work. So that's why the ISO 45001, and even here in Kenya, when we're using OSHA, that was the heart of OSHA, that the workers are involved at each and every, section of the changes that we are doing or the work that we're doing. I don't know if in the different countries you've been able to look at the act or the regulation in line with workers' safety, and does it carry the same heart of involving the workers before the decision making and during the decision making? So basically, create real channels of communication, create time, create training opportunities. In as much as it may seem difficult to really implement this clause for 45. I know it calls for a stretch, especially for those companies that have a very authoritarian way of, of working. It can be a bit of a stretch. But remember, the moment that you want that certification, it means you have to commit to all these clauses. And you have to stretch yourself to be able to ask these workers before you make the decision and as you're continuing with the decision-making process. So our example here today is the suggestion box that nobody opened. So I know many of us, our companies, and maybe in the earlier days, we used to have this suggestion box. And nobody actually usually uses it because, number one, first of all, you are afraid the HR knows your handwriting, or number two, even if you write as many suggestions or complaints or compliments, no one will actually read. So this suggestion box, usually it's usually not the best indicator of workers' participation. Yeah. So the example given here is a physical suggestion box in the warehouse that has sat there for 2 years, and it was opened during the audit preparation. And there were 4 undated notes. Meanwhile, the prime distributors usually hold informal barazas, once a month or in terms of different months. And they never minute the issues that are coming up in these informal barazas, and they never link it to the IMS. So they're losing an opportunity there. So the improvement here we would give as consultants is, first of all, if you're not even going to open the suggestion box, just do away with it. Number two, it's kind of an archaic way of getting suggestions. Instead, come up with a better framework, a better workers' participation framework, such as making the EHS committee vibrant and alive, depending on the different legal requirements. Like for Kenya, the requirement is that 50% must be workers and 50% must be management level. So when you make the EHS committee vibrant and people are able to voice out their issues, and these issues are minuted, and where possible and very strongly, pushed towards the CEO or the topmost person is the head of the committee, then it helps the organization understand or take the considerations of the workers more seriously and implement a better management system. Another thing would be the barazas, or what people call the open forums. Yeah, they need to be more formalized. You need to minute these things. You need to pick up and document whatever is being discussed, but also make sure that people are open and free enough to talk. Yeah, don't make it too formal that now you stifle the voices of the ones who need to speak up. The toolbox talks are also very good places and opportunities to harness the issues coming out from the ground. Don't use the toolbox only to train or to plan for work to be done that day and tell them, oh, today we are going to be doing this and this and this, and these are our objectives. Also take time for them to give their views and their opinion about things, about the operations that are happening. We could also now go digital, whereby you have the QR codes and the Google Forms or any other methodologies that are digital that can give people anonymity and also that is to be able to, send out messages or even a hotline to be able to give people that opportunity to share their experiences and their compliments or their complaints. The issue is have a framework and be able to utilize it, be able to document it. Do not forget to document, because in ISO we said if it's not documented, it's not there. And so if you cannot demonstrate it, then it will be difficult for us as auditors to say that it exists. So here is just an example of prime distributors workers participation framework, where they have a vibrant EHS committee that meets monthly and reviews, that meets quarterly, and they use the dashboards and they have elected the workers' representatives. We also have the barazas, which is the open forum where the CEO comes to the ground and just engages with people. You could even dub these things very fancy names so that people feel more welcome and more heard, rather than just, formally giving it a very stringent name. We could use the toolbox talks and the digital platforms. Maybe even in the chat box, you can tell me how in your organization does the top management or the leadership gather your insights or your contribution as workers. Maybe you can put it in the chat box and we can, learn from one another. So basically, this is, in a nutshell, the overview of Clause 5. So we talked about 5.1 being leadership and commitment. So it gives the mandate for the top leadership to demonstrate their commitment, take accountability, and to ensure that they are providing the resources and promoting that continual improvement, and also questioning the processes and the performance. And then we have the policy, where now we are not just thinking about committing, but we are writing it down and we are noting down exactly what we will do as a commitment and signing it off and communicating it so that it is applied and understood even on the ground. And then we have the roles and responsibilities, knowing that top management alone cannot move the system. We need to delegate the roles, the responsibilities, and the equivalent authorities at the different levels and be able to articulate them either in JDs or the organizational chart or whichever format that your organization uses, and be able to demonstrate that the people working in the various departments or sections, first of all, they're not conflicting with each other in terms of responsibilities and roles, and they're not duplicating the roles, and that all the issues within the ISO management systems are being covered. Remember, things like safety and environment, it shouldn't only lie in the JD for the QHSE manager. They should have attributes in the different job categories. So the production manager, he should be responsible and accountable for some aspect of the safety and environment issues. So make sure that in your organization, so checking about that, so that it's not that the QHSE is the only one carrying EHS and ISO requirements in their JD. Then lastly, we have covered the 5.4, which is the consultation and participation of workers, unique to 45,000. Make sure that your workers are engaged and they are empowered and they are not reprimanded or judged or penalized for speaking up.
Hello, Gladys. Just to cut you small a bit, we had a question from Esther. She was asking, other than attendance forms, are photos of meetings a suitable evidence?
Yes, photos are, but then the issue with photos, you need to, the timestamp and, of course, there are more questions to be asked in terms of the photo. Yeah. So we need, if you can do both, the better. Yeah. But if you can also put in the GPS location, like geolocating or the timestamp and things like that, it can also be accepted as evidence.
Then Nicholas was asking, since this company has only 10 workers, Would you advise on the issue of setting up a safety committee of such a small number of employees?
Okay. And also to take you back to the attendance, why we insist on signed documents, it's because you see, once you append your signature to something, it means that like you took ownership. Yeah. When we say these are the minutes and you signed against it, it shows that you are there and you agreed to that. But a photo might not really show that. So that's why I'm insisting. If you can have both, the better. Sorry, the question you asked was about?
We had a question from Nicholas, who was saying that his company only has 10 workers.
Okay.
Would you advise on the issue of setting up a
Okay.
safety committee? Yes.
So first of all, just to take you back also, the people who are very new to ISO looks at three things. So number one, we are looking at the ISO requirements, the ones written on the ISO standard. If you are meeting that, then you are conforming. Number two, it also looks at the compliance obligations. And here, compliance obligations, we have two aspects under that umbrella. We have the legal requirements, the ones that are written in the laws, and these ones that are brought about by other stakeholders. Let's say the MOU, the SLAs, anything that someone maybe can, I put it in this layman term, someone can take you to court and show it as evidence. Yeah. So that's a compliance requirement. Any needs and expectation of the interested party that has been articulated somewhere, an MOU, an SLA, blah, blah, blah. And also now the law. Those are what we are calling compliance obligations. Then number three, we look at what you as the organization have set up. So your SOPs, your policies, all that. So ISO looks at those three things when we are auditing. Now, to bring you back to the OSH committee. If your company has less than 10 employees, by law, if you're in Kenya, I apologize, I've not read for other countries. According to the Kenyan law, the threshold is 20. So by law, when we are looking at those three aspects, when we are looking at the compliance obligation, if you have less than 20 and you have not set up the committee, you are okay, you are safe in terms of compliance obligations. You have complied, you have conformed. Okay. But in ISO, we usually want to do better, go above the legal requirements. If it is possible for you to start setting up the committee, as an additional, as a best practice, then you can be able to do it. It will be an added opportunity. Because I'm sure there is no organization that wants to remain at 10 people. You want to grow. And the sooner you start doing this as practice and you have that culture inculcated, then it is easier when you are transitioning to the 20 plus or according to whichever law you are following. If your threshold is 20 or 100 or 50, by the time you're getting there, it's already a culture within your organization. So if you follow the law and if you follow ISO at that level for 20 as per OSHA Act, okay. But can you move a step higher and just do it as a best practice? That is the challenge I'd throw to you. Is there any other question?
Thank you very much on that. I think we'll just handle the questions later. Let's try to wind up since we are just a few minutes to 9 p.m. So for those who had the hands up, just wait a bit as we have a facilitator take us through very fast since time is not on our side.
Yeah. So as we finish off, I know you'll be able to be given this to review. There are some changes in 14,001, which we will not dig deeper into, but it was mainly about, and emphasizing on the climate issues, both at the interested parties and also in terms of the entire context. So you need to understand where climate change plays a role in your context. And then for 9001, there's also a change, but it has not yet been published. So we are waiting for it in September. So probably once we get to September, we'll be able to speak more towards this. But the thing is to start preparing early. The key takeaways I want us to go home with is that context is dynamic, just like the world is dynamic. So don't fill that register or that form once. Be reviewing it periodically and set a time for that periodic review, whether it's quarterly, monthly, or whatever. And then interested parties, always remember to include the workers. Then your scope should always match what you actually control, what is within your boundaries. And then leadership commitment is not just about the slogans and the signed policy. It's about showing up in terms of decision making and the resources. So thank you so much. In terms of the questions, I think we'll not take any more. I'll just briefly talk about Indelible Impact. We are a consulting and training firm in Kenya, but we serve the greater parts of Africa. We are now PCB partners. That means we can give you internationally accredited training in terms of ISO systems, and we are NITA approved. So, and our main focus is actually the SMEs. Before they bud into the bigger corporates, we need to help them to start adopting these ISO standards. So if you're there and you have any questions, you can reach out to us and we'll be able to support and help you. Thank you so much. Back to you, Joanna and Paul.
Wow, thank you so much, Gladys. This has been very insightful, interesting. We are so happy to see that we have been able to tackle all